My granddaughter was born on a rainy Friday in February, and I found out about her on a Tuesday in April. 10 weeks later, when my daughter-in-law pushed a linen envelope across a glass coffee table and said, "Her name is Nora. We waited to tell you because the birth was private. And honestly, Roy, you would have brought the wrong energy into the room." I sat in the living room of the West Queen Anne house I had bought for them, holding a photograph of a baby with my late wife's eyes, while my son stared into his coffee, like the bottom of the mug had answers for him. 18 days after that, the same daughter-in-law called me before sunrise, furious because the property tax installment on that same house had not been paid. She said King County wanted $31,800 by noon, and she needed me to wire it immediately. I looked out over Elliott Bay from my little condo, listened to rain ticking against the window, and said, "Sloan, how did you think a house stayed warm just because you photographed it well? Before I tell you how I pulled the floor out from under their entire beautiful life in one afternoon, dome a favor. Hit the like button if you believe a child should know the name of the person who built the roof over her head. Subscribe to Silent Family Revenge for more stories about quiet people who finally stop paying for disrespect. And comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read those comments because they remind me the world still has people who understand gratitude. Now let me take you back to that Tuesday in April. The day I learned I had a granddaughter with a name, Afatse, and 10 weeks of life that had been deliberately kept from me. My name is Roy Whitaker. I am 72 years old. I was born in Butte, Montana, back when the mines still owned half the town, and the wind sounded like it had teeth. My father repaired boilers for a copper company, until one of them blew back and burned his lungs. He lived 3 more years after that, coughing blood into handkerchiefs and telling me never to be proud of suffering. My mother cleaned rooms at a hotel near the bus station. She died at 56. Not from one thing, but from being tired for too many years. I came to Seattle in 1976 with a duffel bag, a union card, and $400 folded inside an old Bible. I started as a plumber's helper in basements that smelled like mildew and coffee grounds. By 1982 I had my own van. By 1989 I had 3 vans. By 2004 Whitaker Mechanical had 46 employees and contracts all over King County. I never cared for the kind of money that announces itself. I wore Dickies work shirts until the collars gave out. I drove a 2006 Ford F-250 with a dent over the rear wheel. I ate breakfast at a place in Ballard where the waitress called me Roy Boy, even though I was old enough to be her father. I owned more than people knew, and I liked it that way. By the time I turned 65, I had sold the plumbing company and kept the buildings, warehouses in Sodu, a small office building in Fremont, a strip of old brick storefronts near Columbia City. Everything sat under Whitaker Holdings, a quiet little company with my name on no sign anywhere. My son Nathan was 36 that spring. His wife, Sloan, was 32. They lived in a restored Craftsman on West Queen Anne, with a view of the Sound if you stood in the upstairs bathroom and leaned left. I had bought it 2 years earlier as a wedding gift, though legally it was owned by Whitaker Holdings and leased to them for $1 a year. The house had been appraised at $3,350,000 after the renovation. Nathan called it our forever home in one of Sloan's videos. Sloan called it a generational sanctuary. I called it a house. Houses need roofs, gutters, taxes, insurance, heat, and someone honest enough to admit who pays for them. Nathan ran what he described as a boutique media strategy firm. From what I could tell, he helped coffee companies choose beige fonts. Sloan was a motherhood and lifestyle influencer before she was even a mother. She had nearly 400,000 followers, a podcast about intentional domesticity, and a pantry where every jar had a label but nobody knew how to cook a meal. Together, they earned maybe $65,000 in a good year. They spent closer to $400,000. The difference was me. I paid the property taxes. I paid the insurance. I paid the utilities. I guaranteed Nathan's business line of credit. I paid the lease on Sloan's white Volvo because she said American trucks didn't photograph well in the driveway. I also paid $9,000 a month for Sloane's father at a memory care place in Tacoma. That had started quietly. After she cried at my kitchen table and told me her brothers were useless and her father needed dignity. She asked me not to tell her family because she didn't want them judging her. I told myself I was helping a sick old man, not buying silence. That Tuesday in April, I was invited over for what Nathan called a small spring lunch. I remember the exact words because I wrote them on the calendar. Small spring lunch. I drove from my condo in Belltown through a curtain of rain and parked behind a black electric SUV. I had also paid to charge. Since the house utilities came through my account, Sloane opened the door wearing a cream sweater and an expression people use when the cleaning crew arrives early. "Roy," she said. "Not Dad. Not welcome. Just Roy. I didn't realize you were already here." I looked at my watch. It was 12 o'clock. Exactly when they had told me to come. Inside, 8 people were sitting around the dining room table. 2 were Sloane's brothers from Portland, the ones who were apparently useless when the memory care bill came due. Her mother was there in pearls and a cardigan. 3 of Sloane's friends were there. Women with small gold necklaces, and the same careful smile. A photographer was packing lenses near the window. No one stood when I entered. Nathan looked at me, then looked away. He had always done that when his wife wanted him to be smaller than he was. I took the empty chair at the far end of the table, the one near the hallway, where people put the relative they are willing to include but not honor. The conversation was about nursery colors. Not possible nursery colors. Finished nursery colors. Sloane's friend with a voice like a glass bell said Sage was over. Clay was more emotionally grounded. Sloane's mother said the announcement images had turned out beautifully. Nathan coughed into his napkin and did not look at me. After 10 minutes, I said, "Announcement images for what?" The room went still, in a way I had only felt before, on job sites. Right after someone dropped a tool from a roof, and everyone waited to hear if it hit pavement or a person. Sloane put down her fork. She looked at her mother. Her mother gave the smallest nod, like they had rehearsed this. Then, Sloane reached into a basket beside the sideboard, pulled out a linen envelope, and slid it across the table toward me with 2 fingers. "We were going to tell you after dessert," she said. "But since you asked, this is Nora Elise. She was born February 16th. I opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph of a baby wrapped in a white blanket, sleeping under a window, with rain blurred behind the glass. Her mouth was tiny and serious. Her hair was dark, the same brown my wife, June, had worn in every picture from before. Cancer made her gray. My granddaughter was 10 weeks old. I had not known she existed. I want you to understand something about old men who worked with their hands. We are not calm because nothing hurts us. We are calm because panic never fixed a burst pipe, never steadied a ladder, never stopped a ceiling from coming down. I held that photograph steady because my hands had learned discipline long before my heart did. I looked at Nathan. February 16th was 10 weeks ago. He swallowed. "Dad, I wanted to call." Sloane touched his wrist, and he stopped talking, as if she had pressed a mute button. "What Nathan means is that we made a thoughtful decision," she said. "The birth center was very protective of our environment. Afterward, we needed quiet. We needed control. We needed to introduce Nora in a way that aligned with the life we're building." "The life you're building," I repeated. "Yes," she said. There were brand conversations happening around the launch of my motherhood series. The first images mattered. The first visitors mattered. My family came. A few close friends came. It was intimate. "How many people?" She blinked. "Roy, I don't think the number is the point." "How many?" Nathan whispered. 42. 42 people had come into the house I owned, stood on the floors I paid to refinish, eaten food prepared in the kitchen I had remodeled, and met my granddaughter before I even knew she had drawn a breath. 42 people. I was not one of them. One of Sloane's friends said, "It's just that newborn spaces are very sensitive. Energy matters." I looked at her. I've soldered copper pipe in crawl spaces, with rats watching me. I'm familiar with energy. Nobody laughed. Sloane sat straighter. This is exactly what I mean. You make things heavy. You bring this roughness into rooms. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but it doesn't fit what we're trying to create for Nora. There it was. Fit. The same word people use for clothes. Furniture. Applicants. And dogs, they returned to shelters. I did not fit the image my money had purchased. I set the photograph down carefully. Nathan, did you tell her no? His eyes went wet. Dad, did you say? My father should meet his granddaughter before the internet does, Sloan answered for him. We are not going to be shamed for setting boundaries around our child. Boundaries, I said. That's a strong word for a locked door someone else paid for. Her mother made a small offended sound. Roy, please don't turn this into one of your working-class speeches. I stood. The chair scraped against the floor, and every head turned, like the noise had committed a crime. I looked around the room at the flowers, the linen, the painted built-ins, the framed prints, the filtered light. I had paid for all of it and somehow become the stain. Sloan said, You're leaving. The halibut is about to come out. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. Before I go, I want a straight answer. Is the property tax installment due this month? She frowned. I think so. Nathan handles that with you. Nathan doesn't handle that with me. I handle it. Nathan has never handled one bill connected to this house. Nathan looked down at the table. Sloane's mouth tightened. Fina, yes? I believe it's due. Why no reason? I said, Enjoy the halibut. I walked down the hallway past photographs of Sloane in linen dresses. Sloane in Palm Springs. Sloane holding a mug on the porch. Sloane laughing with friends in a kitchen she had never paid to heat. There were no photographs of June. No photographs of me. Not even one of Nathan as a boy. Though I had boxes of them at home. I stepped onto the porch. The rain had turned light and silver. I closed the door softly because I had installed that door myself. And a good door deserves respect even when the people behind it do not. I sat in my truck for a long time with the envelope on the passenger seat. I did not cry. I know people expect old fathers to cry in stories like this. I did not. What I felt was older and colder than grief. It was the feeling I used to get when a subcontractor told me a wall was fine and I could see, from 30 feet away, that the framing was wrong. The whole thing looked pretty until you knew where to press. I took out my phone and called my attorney. Her name is Miriam Cole. She has been my lawyer for 23 years and my friend for almost as long. She answered on the third ring. Roy, tell me nobody died. Something did. I said, I need you in your office tomorrow morning. Pull every file connected to the Queen Anne house. Whitaker Holdings, Nathan's line of credit, the Volvo lease, and the memory care payments for Sloane's father. There was a pause. What happened? I have a granddaughter. Her name is Nora. She is 10 weeks old. I met her in a photograph today because her mother decided I didn't fit the room. Miriam was quiet long enough for me to hear her breathing. Roy, I need to know what I am legally required to keep paying. Legally? Nothing. The house is company property. The lease is discretionary and conditional. The business money is a personal loan. The car is under your guarantee. The memory care payments are gifts. You can stop all of it. Then stop all of it by the end of the week. Are you sure I looked at the photograph? Nora's little fist was tucked under her chin like she was already keeping a secret. Miriam, I built my son a house so warm he forgot what weather was. I'm done being the weatherproofing. The next morning, I was in Miriam's office at 6:45. She had coffee ready. No sugar in mine. 2 sugars in hers. The rain had stopped, and downtown Seattle looked scrubbed clean through her window. I remember that because it felt cruel. The city looking new while my family looked exactly like what it had always been. For 4 hours. We went through the machinery of a life I had mistaken for generosity. First, the automatic payment for the Queen Anne property taxes was canceled. The lease required the occupants to maintain taxes, utilities, and insurance reimbursements. They had never read that clause because why read a clause when an old man reads the bills for you? Second, the business line of credit that Nathan used as if it were income was frozen. Third, the Volvo lease company was notified that I would no longer guarantee payment beyond the current month. Fourth, The credit card linked to my business account, the one Sloan called the household card, was closed. It had a $50,000 monthly limit and had averaged $32,000 a month for the past year. Fifth, the payment to Rainier Harbor Memory Care in Tacoma was stopped. A formal letter went to the facility explaining that Sloan's family would need to assume responsibility going forward. I asked Miriam to make it polite. The old man in that facility had never wronged me. His daughter had. By the time I walked out of Miriam's office, we had ended just over $520,000 a year in support. $500,000. I had been pouring $500,000 every year into a family that could not pour one phone call back into me. I drove to the Ballard Diner. The waitress, Martze, put coffee in front of me without asking. She said, "You look like you just fired somebody." I did. I said, "Anybody I like." My old self. She studied me for a second, then poured more coffee. I left her $100 on a $15 check because Marcy knew how to show up. Showing up is a virtue people with curated lives sometimes forget. For 5 days. Nothing happened. Legal notices move slower than pain. Cards take time to fail. Families take time to discover the shape of the hand that has been holding them up. I went about my life. I inspected a leaky roof in Fremont. I had lunch with an old foreman in Kent. I bought a tiny stuffed whale for Nora and put it on my kitchen counter, though I did not know if I would ever get to give it to her. On Monday morning, at 5:42, my phone rang. It was Sloan. I knew before I answered that the card had declined somewhere expensive. "Roy," she said, sharp and breathless, "there is something wrong with the household account." I was standing in my kitchen in a sweatshirt, watching a ferry move across the gray water. "Good morning to you too." "Don't do that." The card declined. I was ordering final pieces for Nora's dedication brunch, and the vendor said, "The account is closed." Closed. Roy. Not declined. Closed. That's correct. Silence. Then, "Excuse me, I closed it." "Why would you close our household card without discussing it with us?" "Because it was not your household card. It was my account." "Is this about the lunch?" "It's about many lunches. That one just came with a photograph." She inhaled hard. I could picture her in that white kitchen, one hand on the marble island, Nora asleep somewhere upstairs, Nathan hovering uselessly nearby. "You are being punitive." "No," I said. "I am being accurate. Do you understand what this does to my schedule? I have vendors. I have deposits. We are doing Nora's dedication next weekend. People are flying in. Am I one of the people?" She did not answer. That told me everything. "Sloan, the card is closed. The property tax payment will not be made by me. The car payment will not be made by me. Your father's memory care bill will not be made by me. Nathan's business credit will not be funded by me. Miriam will send formal notices." Her voice changed. The soft influencer tone disappeared so fast, it almost clicked. "You miserable old man." "There she is," I said quietly. "You cannot do this. You cannot just destroy a young family because your feelings got hurt." My feelings did not get hurt. My position became clear. "Nathan is going to call you. He should have called me in February." I hung up. 26 minutes later, Nathan called. I answered because despite everything, he was my son. And because sometimes you have to hear a person break before you know whether there is anything left to save. "Dad, what is happening?" "I think Sloan told you. She said you canceled everything. The credit card, the tax payment, my business line. The Volvo people emailed. Rainier Harbor called Sloan's mother." "Dad, what are you doing?" I was still at the window. The ferry had vanished into weather. "I'm stopping." "Stopping what?" "Paying for the version of your life that required me to be invisible." He made a sound like someone had pushed air out of his chest. "Dad, we have a baby. You have a daughter. I have a granddaughter. Those are not arguments. They are responsibilities. You can't put us out of our home. It is not your home. It is a house owned by Whitaker Holdings and leased to you under conditions. You have violated those conditions by failing to reimburse taxes and utilities. Miriam will send a notice. You will have 60 days to purchase the property at fair market value or move." "Dad, We don't have $3 million. I know. Then what are we supposed to do? What your mother and I did. What Marcy at the diner does. What the men who work in crawl spaces under your pretty houses do. You live inside the life you can afford. He started crying then. Not loud. Nathan never cried loud, even as a child. He cried like he was afraid. Crying would take up too much space. Dad, I messed up. Yes. I should have called you. Yes. Sloan thought it would be complicated. That's not an answer. That's a curtain. He breathed into the phone. I don't know how to fix this. You cannot fix 10 weeks. You can only decide whether the next 10 weeks will be honest. He whispered. Can you meet Nora? I don't want a staged introduction. I don't want a brunch. I don't want linen napkins and a photographer. I want to hold my granddaughter in a room where nobody is thinking about whether my jacket matches the furniture. He cried harder. I let him. A father does not have to rescue a grown man from every consequence. Sometimes the loving thing is to let the consequence speak until the child finally hears it. The next call came from Sloan that afternoon. She did not bother sounding polished. She screamed for almost 3 minutes. She called me abusive, controlling, jealous, classless, and emotionally unsafe. She said I was trying to punish a newborn. She said her father could be displaced from memory care, and that I would have to live with that. She said her brothers would think she had lied to them. That part caught me. Would they be wrong? She went quiet. I said, do they know I've been paying? That's none of your business. I paid $9,000 a month for 14 months. That makes it at least a little bit my business. She said, if you don't reverse this, you will never see Nora. I swear to God, Roy, I will make sure she grows up not knowing your name. That was the sentence that turned my sadness into stone. Sloan, I said, listen carefully. You just used my granddaughter as a weapon because a credit card stopped working. I want you to hear that sentence inside your own head. I am protecting my child. No, you are holding her in front of you like furniture in front of a door. You are not protecting her. You are using her. She tried to interrupt, but I kept going. There is something you should understand because I think you have mistaken quiet for weak. The house you live in belongs to Whitaker Holdings. I own Whitaker Holdings. The building where Nathan keeps his office in Fremont belongs to a partnership I control. The podcast studio he uses rent-free is in that building. Rainier Harbor Memory Care sits on land owned by a company I invested in 15 years ago. The vendor you hired for Nora's dedication rents kitchen space in one of my so-do warehouses. She said nothing. I am not telling you that to threaten you. I am telling you that the life you have been calling your brand is a stage I built with my hands, my risk, and my money. I let you stand in the light because I thought it made Nathan happy. But you forgot there was a foundation under that stage. You forgot foundations can be inspected. You forgot rotten beams get removed. Roy, please. It was the first time she had said please to me without wanting a check. No, I said. That word is late. I hung up and turned off my phone. I sat in my kitchen with the little stuffed whale on the counter and the photograph of Nora beside it. For the first time, I cried. Not much. Just enough to remind me that I was still a person, and not just an old machine built to sign checks. The next 2 weeks were not peaceful. People think revenge feels like thunder. It doesn't. Real consequences feel like paperwork. Certified letters. Forwarded emails. Voicemails you don't return. A car sitting in the driveway. Waiting for a tow truck. A grown son discovering that income and allowance are not the same word. Nathan called 7 times. I answered twice. Sloane's mother left a message saying families should not count money during emotional times. I almost laughed. Sloane's oldest brother called from Portland and asked whether it was true that I had been paying for their father's care. I told him yes. He was quiet for a long time, then said, she told us she had it handled. She did. I said, she handled me. He apologized. I told him not to. He had a job, 2 children, and a mortgage. He had been lied to as much as I had. Miriam called on the 15th day. Nathan wants to talk about the house. Of course he does. He says they cannot buy it. He says the market is tight and moving will damage Sloane's business. He is asking for more time. What did you tell him? I told him I represent the owner, not the son. That made me smile for the first time in days. Give them 90 days. You sure? Yes. Not because I'm softening, because I want there to be no excuse. And Miriam, tell Nathan I will meet him Saturday at Marcy's Diner in Ballard. 9 in the morning. Just him. If Sloane comes, I leave. Nathan arrived at 8:58, wearing a jacket I had not bought. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was that he looked tired in a way money cannot hide. He sat across from me in the back booth. Marcy brought coffee, looked from him to me, and understood more than either of us said. Dad, he began, then stopped. Tell me about Nora, I said. He looked up, surprised. What, from the beginning? February 16th. Tell me about my granddaughter. So he did. He told me Sloane had gone into labor before dawn during a storm. He told me the midwife had played soft music, and Sloane had yelled at everyone to turn it off. He told me Nora was born at 6:18 inches the morning with a full head of dark hair and one hand open, like she had arrived asking for something. I listened. I did not interrupt. The diner moved around us. Plates clattered. Somebody laughed at the counter. Rain slid down the front window in crooked lines. My son gave me 10 weeks of my granddaughter in pieces, because that was all he had left to give. When he finished, his hands were shaking. I am sorry, he said. Not because of the money. I mean, yes, I'm scared. But I'm sorry because I knew it was wrong. I knew when she said not to call you. I knew when her family came over. I knew when the photographer came. I knew when we posted the announcement. Every time. I told myself I would fix it later. Later is where cowards hide. I said. He nodded. I was embarrassed of you. I had expected it. It still landed. He kept going. Sloane's friends made comments. About your truck. Your boots. The way you say what you mean. The way you don't know the names of designers or restaurants. I started feeling like I had to manage you. Then I started not inviting you. Then not telling you became easier than explaining you. I hate myself for saying that. But it's true. I looked at my hands. Thick fingers. Old scars. A burn mark from a pipe in 1998. The hands that had fed him. Bathed him. Signed tuition checks. Fixed his first apartment. Held his mother when she was dying. Those hands had embarrassed him. Nathan, I said, the things you were embarrassed by are the things that kept you safe. My truck carried tools. My boots walked job sites. My voice got loud because nobody hears a whisper over a compressor. You were ashamed of the machine while living off what it produced. He covered his face. I let him sit with it. Then I said, here are my terms. He lowered his hands. You will leave the Queen Anne house. I will not sell it to you. I will not rent it to you. You and Sloane will find an apartment you can afford on income you actually earn. You will get real employment with payroll taxes, and a supervisor who does not care about your vision. You will begin repaying the loan I made to your business, even if it is only $500 a month. Sloane and her brothers will handle their father's care. Not me. He nodded slowly, like each sentence weighed 50 pounds. And every Sunday for the next year, you will bring Nora to my condo for 2 hours. Alone. No Sloane. No camera. No posting. No content. I will feed her, hold her, learn her smell, learn her cry, and become a grandfather in real time instead of through an envelope. Dad. Sloane won't like that. Sloane doesn't have to like it. She only has to understand that using Nora as leverage ends every conversation. He looked at me. And after a year, if you have done those things without whining, lying, or sending your wife to negotiate, we will talk about what a family can still be, not what it was. That is gone. What it can be. He stared at his coffee. I don't know if my marriage survives this. Then maybe your marriage was also being held up by my money. He flinched, but he did not argue. After a long silence, he reached across the table. For a second, I saw the little boy who used to reach for my hand in parking lots. Then I saw the grown man who had decided not to call me when his daughter was born. Both of them were my son. That is the hard part of being a parent. You do not get to love only the version that was easiest. Okay, he said. I'll do it. Say the whole thing. I'll move. I'll get a job. I'll repay the loan. I'll bring Nora every Sunday. Alone. And if Sloane threatens to keep Nora from me again, the deal is off. No, the relationship changes permanently. I will not be blackmailed with a baby. He nodded. I understand. The first Sunday he brought Nora to my condo. I cleaned like a nervous man expecting the governor. I vacuumed twice. I bought diapers in 3 sizes because I did not know how babies worked anymore. I put June's old rocking chair by the window and placed the stuffed whale on the side table. Nathan arrived at 10 o'clock. He carried Nora in a green car seat. He looked exhausted. There was a faint red mark across his cheek that might have been from sleep or from a difficult conversation. I did not ask. Some things are not my business until my granddaughter is unsafe. And she was safe. He unbuckled her and lifted her out. She wore a yellow sweater with wooden buttons. Her hair stood up in dark little waves. She looked at me with solemn eyes, as if she had been sent to inspect the premises. This is your pop? Nathan whispered. Pope. Not Roy. Not the wrong energy. Pope. He handed her to me. She was lighter than memory and heavier than regret. For a moment, she stiffened. Then she made a tiny snuffling sound and pressed her face into my shirt. Right over my heart. I sat down in June's rocking chair because my knees had become unreliable. I cried then. I am not ashamed of it. I cried for the 10 weeks I missed. I cried for June, who would have known exactly how to hold her. I cried for the boy Nathan had been, and the man he had become, and the man he might still turn into. Mostly, I cried because Nora was real. Warm, breathing, not a photograph, not a bargaining chip, not content. A child. Nathan sat at my kitchen table and said nothing. That was the first decent thing he had done in a long time. He let me have those minutes without managing them. The Queen Anne house sold 4 months later in a private sale for $3,200,000. Not the fantasy number Sloane had once put in a caption, but a real number, from real buyers, in a real market. Nathan and Sloane moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Shoreline with beige carpet and a balcony overlooking a parking lot. Sloane hated it so much, she stopped filming inside for 3 months. Nathan got a job as an operations coordinator for a small HVAC company in Renton. I did not get him the job. In fact, I made sure nobody there knew me. He had to show up at 7:30, answer to a woman named Denise, and learn that spreadsheets are less forgiving than fathers. He started paying me $500 a month. The first check came folded inside a card with no message, just his name. I kept it in a drawer for a week before depositing it. Not because I needed the money, because he needed the check to clear. Sloane lost 1/3 of her brand deals by summer. It turns out a lifestyle built on invisible subsidies gets less inspiring when the subsidy becomes visible by disappearing. She tried to pivot into honest motherhood. But honesty is hard to sell when your audience can smell performance through a screen. Eventually, she took part-time consulting work for a children's clothing company. Real invoices, real deadlines, real tax forms. Her brothers took over their father's memory care bill with Sloane. They split it 3 ways. The old man stayed where he was. No one was thrown into the street. The catastrophe she had laid at my feet became, once divided among the people who should have carried it, manageable. That is true of many burdens. They only look impossible when one silent person is carrying all of them. Nora comes to my condo every Sunday. She is almost 2 now. She calls me Pop, and calls every boat on Elliott Bay a bath, which I have not corrected because she says it with great authority. She knows where I keep the measuring tape, and likes pulling it out across the kitchen floor while I make grilled cheese. She has June's eyes and Nathan's stubborn lower lip, and when she laughs, I still look toward the doorway as if my wife might walk in to hear it. Last fall, I sold one of my so-do warehouses. The first building I ever bought after I stopped working out of a van. I used part of the proceeds to start the June Whitaker Trade Fund. We pay tuition, tools, and exam fees for young people going into plumbing, electrical, welding, and HVAC programs. Not because trades are noble in a slogan, because they are honest, because the country still needs people who can fix what leaks, wire what powers us, and show up when the heat goes out. People ask me sometimes whether cutting Nathan off was worth it. They ask carefully, as if I might be haunted. I am haunted, but not by the cutoff. I am haunted by the years before it. The years I mistook comfort for love. The years I treated money like a blanket and kept throwing it over every hard lesson before it could touch my son. The truth is, Nathan did not become a man who could hide his daughter from his father by accident. He became that man one rescued mistake at a time. A missed rent payment I covered. A failed business idea I refinanced. A rude silence I ignored because I didn't want to ruin dinner. A wife who looked down on me while enjoying the view from a porch I paid for. I saw it. I excused it. That part belongs to me. Cause and effect is not just for pipes and pressure valves. It is for families too. If you remove every consequence from a child's life, do not be shocked when he grows into an adult who thinks consequences are cruelty. If you teach him that love means rescue, do not be shocked when he calls boundaries abuse. If you build his world on your back, do not be shocked when he forgets you are a person and starts thinking of you as flooring. That was the lesson I learned too late, and just in time. Too late for the first 10 weeks of Nora's life. Just in time for the rest of it. I do not believe every family problem should be answered with money being cut off. I'm not saying that. Money is a tool, and like every tool, it can build or it can injure. But when money becomes the only language people respect, sometimes silence is not noble. Sometimes silence is permission. Sometimes the most loving sentence a parent can say is, "No more." The spine I grew at 72 did not make me cruel. It made me honest. It did not destroy my family. It revealed which parts of it had been standing and which parts had only been propped up. Nathan is not fixed. I am not fixed. Families are not faucets. You do not turn a wrench and stop all the leaking forever. But he is trying. He shows up. He works. He brings his daughter. He says thank you without looking like the words cost him blood. A few Sundays ago, Nora fell asleep on my chest in June's rocking chair. Nathan stood by the window, looking at the water. After a while, he said, "Dad, I used to think you were rough because you didn't know how to be gentle." I did not answer. He said, "I think now maybe you were rough because you spent your life standing between us and rough things." I looked down at Nora's sleeping face. "Maybe," I said, "but I should have let some of those rough things teach you." He nodded. "I'm learning now. That is all I wanted. Not punishment. Not revenge. Though I know what this channel is called. I wanted the truth to land somewhere solid. I wanted my granddaughter to grow up knowing that love is not a lifestyle photograph. Love is who shows up. Love is who tells the truth. Love is who pays attention after the camera is gone. If you have made it this far, do me one favor. Call someone today who should not have to wonder whether they matter to you. Not tomorrow. Today. And if this story hits something in your own life, subscribe to Silent Family Revenge. Sometimes subscribing costs you nothing, but it helps stories like this find the people who need to hear them. Because the hardest part of all of this was not the phone call where Sloan threatened me with my own granddaughter. It was not the certified letters or the sale of the Queen Anne house. It was not even that first lunch, when I held a photograph instead of a baby. The hardest part was admitting that I had spent 36 years building the soft road Nathan used to walk away from me. I thought I was protecting him from the cold I came from. But children need to know weather exists. They need to know bills arrive. They need to know a roof is not magic. Dinner is not automatic. And respect is not something old people should have to earn from children who live on their labor. Character is built the way a house is built. Stud by stud. Nail by nail. Rule by rule. Consequence by consequence. You cannot skip the framing and then act surprised when the walls bow. You cannot pour no foundation and then blame the rain when the house sinks. I still keep Nora's first photograph in a drawer. Not on the wall. A drawer. I take it out sometimes when I need to remember what a frame can do. A frame can hold a picture. It can also show you exactly who has been kept outside it. Now, every Sunday, Nora comes through my door in person. She runs down the hall shouting "Pop" before she even takes off her shoes. She bangs wooden spoons against my pots. She leaves fingerprints on my windows. She turns my quiet condo into a place that feels lived in. And every time I pick her up, I think the same thing. I built a lot in my life. Houses, companies, accounts, trust documents, all of it. But the most important thing I ever built was the line I finally drew. On one side of it was the man who paid to be disrespected. On the other side was a grandfather with his granddaughter in his arms. I know which side I plan to die on.